Okay, good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon. I'll just ask as usual, can you hear me? If someone can type. Can anyone hear me? Okay, thanks. Chloe, Patrick, Shirit, et al. Okay, good. So welcome to Stark at Home episode probably 8. And this is a very special one for several different reasons. First, we're very honored to have Vitalk Buterin come and speak a little bit about the subject matter in a few minutes. And another thing is that this episode is sort of a preparation towards the release of open source code by StarkWare of a very, very efficient prover and verifier. So I want, we already tweeted this, and this is also in the information, but this is sort of the specs that we are measuring for the code that will be released next week. It is a STARK prover and a STARK verifier for a computational integrity statement discussing a long hash chain. And here you can see some measurements on a sort of standard quad-core computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM. So for 100,000 hashes, the proving time is under 10 seconds, and the verification time is roughly 2.3 milliseconds. The proof length there is around, I believe, 40 or 60 kilobytes. I forgot. So it's a very, very efficient proof system. Again, it's going to be open sourced under Apache license, basically handed over to the Aetherium Foundation, who funded this project. So everyone at StarkWare who has been working very hard on this is very proud and excited about this event. I also have with me David Levitt from StarkWare, who headed the Stark Friendly Hash code project, which is now called ethSTARK and will be released under such thing. So basically, today's episode will be the story of ethSTARK, how we came about it, and a little bit of a sneak peek into the construction and how we went about soliciting and choosing a Stark-friendly hash function. So that's the story for this time. As usual in these episodes, we'll be very lean on the sort of math and formal stuff, and it will be a lot of stuff about intuition and roughly and vague thoughts. There will be, of course, pointers to more information where you can read about the math and the engineering. When the code comes out, of course, it will all be very extensively documented, and people can see it. So, roughly speaking, I don't know why this jumped there, but let me just go back here. So, roughly speaking, the story is about the fact that 2 years ago, the Aetherium Foundation contracted StarkWare right around July to help find a hash function for which proving statements in a Stark system, post-quantum secure, will be efficient enough. And 2 years, it was a 2-year project, and StarkWare committed to finding such a hash function and then writing an efficient prover and verifier for it. And the specs were that it should reach a certain level of speed on a quad core with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is why we're showing you this graph measured on such a machine. And then we need to release open source code for it. So I'm very happy now to hand it over to Vitalk. So I'll invite him on screen. Just 1 second. And I'll let him explain a little bit about the context and his vision for why this was done and where it should go. For those who this is the first time they're watching this format, so let me just point out that you can see at the bottom of the screen a Ask a Question tab. So during each epoch of this, please go ahead and fill in questions, and after each part, we'll go to that area and answer questions sequentially. You can also sort of write on the chat board. So like after every once in a while, we'll go and look at the questions and answer them. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to Vitalik, who needs no introduction here. Okay.
Okay, hello everyone. I guess I'd want to ask for can everyone hear me okay, check two. So, can everyone hear me? Okay, excellent. So I guess I'll kind of start off with a bit of kind of the history and the motivation behind kind of basically what we kind of asked StarkWare to do with Starks and some of our interest in Starks in general. So basically, well, I actually met Ellie for the first time back in 2013. This was my very first visit to Israel, where when I was still writing for a Bitcoin magazine, and I had learned about this thing called succinct computational integrity and privacy and zero knowledge proofs, and I found all of these kind of ideas very exciting, and kind of immediately saw how promising they are in terms of both privacy and in terms of scalability. So after that, of course, kind of zero coin return was replaced by zero cash, and zero cash became Zcash, and we saw a lot of kind of work on using zero knowledge proofs on the privacy side. And that's kind of turned into many more projects, including, like, for example, Tornado Cash that's running on Ethereum today. But at the same time, we're also interested in first of all, using kind of snarks for not just privacy, but also scalability. And second, not just looking into the kind of older elliptic curve based flavor of snarks but also looking into this kind of newer hash-based flavor, the thing that Ellie ended up calling Starks, right? So the reason why we were interested in Starks at the beginning was kind of two things, and one of them is kind of faster proving time. So proving times with these kind of hash-based Starks tends to be considerably faster than proving times for any of the protocols that require like one elliptic curve operation for every constraint that you have. And also, we want to have quantum resistance. We want Ethereum to be a protocol that lasts for decades and potentially, all the way up until and maybe past the singularity. And so, having at least the ability to have an upgrade path to quantum resistant things is something that's kind of very much necessary for us. So fast forwarding a couple of years, and this is around the kind of end of 2017, beginning of 2018, when the development of ETH2 kind of really started in full force. And that was the time when we were really kind of beefing up the research team, doing a lot of work on just trying to really take our kind of ideas for scalability from theory to actually something that we can implement. And that was the time when we decided to kind of give Starks another look, right? So this was the time when the StarkWare team had also come up with kind of a lot of interesting improvements to how efficient proving a Stark is. So I remember back in the older days, the proofs were potentially like megabytes in size, and then it turned into hundreds of kilobytes in size, and now it's less than 100 kilobytes in size. And in our blockchain use case, having a proof that's less than 100 kilobytes in size is actually perfectly viable, right? So just Ethereum blocks, for example, right, their average size right now is somewhere around like 20 to 50 kilobytes, and kind of exceptional blocks sometimes go into the hundreds of kilobytes. So 100 kilobytes for a Stark is kind of perfectly in line for us, right? And so talked to the StarkWare team and kind of expressed interest in us giving them a grant where one part of the primary focus is just coming up with a hash function that's more friendly to kind of proving inside of a Stark. So hash functions that kind of consist of operations that you can kind of understand that are more arithmetic. And so where in order to prove them inside one of these proof systems, you don't have to kind of get all this overhead from decomposing them all the way down into individual bits, and unfortunately, a lot of the current functions, they use a lot of these kind of bitwise operations, and so you do have to put them into break them down into individual bits a lot of the time. But there's a lot of this kind of fairly new families of arithmetic functions and some older families of arithmetic functions that don't have these weaknesses, and so there was a lot of kind of hard work done on that. And then the other important thing is just getting the efficiency of proving up, right? So the challenge here with proving efficiency, right, is that, so we talked about kind of zero knowledge proofs for privacy and zero knowledge proofs for scalability. And even for zero knowledge proofs for privacy, kind of proving time was an issue, right? So if anyone was kind of around for a long time, you probably remember like really early versions of Zcash where you needed to, like 90 seconds to sign a transaction, which was like very terrible and made the thing unusable. And since then, you have Zcash sampling and all of these upgrades, and now you can even sign a zk-SNARK transaction on a mobile wallet in a couple of seconds. So huge amount of progress there. But the problem is that if you want to use zero knowledge proofs for scalability, then it gets harder, right? And the intuitive reason why is because like a single transaction contains only your stuff and a block contains a lot of people's stuff, right? So we know that it's already hard to make a zero knowledge proof that just covers your own stuff. And that's what you need if you want to use SNARKs or STARKs for privacy. But if we want to use SNARKs or STARKs for scalability, then you basically have to prove over not just your own stuff, but you have to make a proof that does some computations over a block containing a whole bunch of people's stuff. So this is hard. And it's even considerably harder than the privacy use case. But ethSTARK is coming out now, and they've given some numbers that are kind of actually very impressive in this regard, right? So just to give one concrete example, one of the use cases of STARKs that we really care about is what's called witness compression. So basically, if you have an Ethereum block, and you want that Ethereum block to be verified by a node that doesn't have the entire state, so by a node that doesn't have access to everybody's balances, all the smart contract code, kind of everything that all the transactions end up touching, then right now what you have to do is you have to have the block, then also have that data, and then for every piece of data have a Merkle proof that proves that that piece of data is kind of in the state and in the correct position, right? So in an average Ethereum block, and if the block itself might be, say, 40 kilobytes, the amount of data you might need to access might be somewhere around 100 to 200 kilobytes, and then the Merkle branch is proving it. Well, right now it's actually completely terrible. In the worst case, it's like 400 megabytes, but we're planning some improvements that will be able to push that down to, in the normal case, like 600 kilobytes, in the worst case, 4 megabytes. But we want, ideally we want something even smaller, right? Like even megabyte-sized blocks coming in every 12 seconds is kind of it is a high cost, and it is something that our kind of developers don't want to inflict on everyone who wants to kind of stay as part of the network. And so the idea behind witness compression is, instead of having all of these Merkle branches, one Merkle branch for like every single kind of leaf, every single account that's being accessed in a block, you would just have a single proof, and that proof just proves that, hey, all these Merkle branches exist. So if you do that, then the size of this extra data that you need to verify a block without the state goes down from maybe 600 kilobytes to 4 megabytes all the way down to like maybe 100 to 300 kilobytes. And that potentially could make it viable to either make the blockchain safer by a factor of 10 or increase the gas limit by a factor of like 5 to 10 or any combination in the middle. So it's and witness compression is potentially a very serious boost in that regard. And it's also important for sharding, where this kind of stateless approach to verifying blocks basically becomes mandatory, right? Because there's just too much state for kind of any node to possibly download. So that's another example of a use case. A third example of a use case would be we have a post-quantum alternative to signature aggregation. So right now we have BLS signatures, which have kind of really nice and clean math that lets you just add a bunch of signatures together and combine them into a single signature that kind of represents a whole bunch of people signing a whole bunch of different transactions. But the problem is that BLS is not quantum safe. And the nice thing about aggregation using STARKs is that if you just basically use something like a Lamport signature, and then which is itself made out of hashes, and then you just kind of Stark prove over a whole bunch of hashes, then you also have a kind of signature aggregation. So that's another thing. And kind of the specific numbers that we saw in the slides, right? So we saw it was 100,000 hashes in less than 10 seconds on a laptop, which basically means 10,000 hashes a second. So that actually means that like if you're creating a block, you would actually be able to generate a witness in something like 1 to 2 seconds, right? Which is really powerful. Like that, like it basically means that like that's already enough so that nodes that are not mining nodes at least would be able to actually just like use these proofs that get created a couple of seconds after the blocks get created and actually be able to verify all of the blocks. So a lot of kind of really good progress there. And in general, and if anyone's seen the kind of the Ethereum 2 kind of roadmap that I came up with a couple of months ago, like a lot of the work that we want to do later on is kind of very dependent on these zero knowledge proofs over hashes, right? So, the fact that it actually is possible to make Starks over hashes kind of that quickly is kind of a very significant boon for, I think, the blockchain space. I mean, both in the short term and also in the long term, especially after we have quantum computers and after kind of a lot of the other constructions just stop being useful, then, hashes are one of these kind of really important building blocks that just continue being viable even after we have quantum computers. And so hash-based Starks over that are proving over other hash-based cryptography is just in the long term likely to be a really important primitive. And StarkWare has been working kind of very hard for the last 2 years to make all of these things happen. And I think we're definitely very glad just to see the amount of progress that they've had. Okay, I went ahead with first questions.
I just want to say, please, go. So I saw, please encourage others, ask your questions and don't be shy about it.
Sure. So what are the Ethereum Foundation's plans to build on top of ethSTARK? What's the first thing we'd like to see built with it? I think, there's a couple of things that we could look at. So once again, kind of the two big cases of Starks, and this also answers the second question. The two big use cases of Starks are privacy and scalability. And privacy is, and obviously Starks can kind of help with both. And so on the scalability side, I think making even a prototype of witness compression would be one thing that I imagine we would be really interested in doing. Making even a prototype of is using Starks to verify kind of other parts of the state changes that happen inside of a blockchain. Potentially, you could use Starks inside of light client protocols. That's another kind of use case that we haven't thought about enough. So a light client asks for, like, basically tells me, like, hey, tell me about all of the receipts or all of the transactions that satisfy some properties. And right now it takes a really long time to scan for it. And potentially, if you have kind of clients provide that information and then use Starks to prove it, then you can get something. Like you can create a much better kind of ecosystem for light clients. On the privacy side, and I think someone should just go ahead and build a Stark-based version of something like Tornado Cash, for example, just to kind of see what happens. One of the challenges, though, with using Starks for privacy, right, is that, so this is going back to the kind of a snark is a proof for one of, or proofs for privacy are proving over one, each person proving over their own stuff, and proofs for scalability is one person proving over everybody's stuff. So there's a flip side to that, which is that proofs for privacy, it basically means if you just have zero knowledge proofs for privacy, that means that you have a whole bunch of proofs, basically one proof for every transaction. And so if you were to just do Tornado Cash using Starks, the thing would probably not be very viable because the gas costs would be like much higher, like maybe 10 times higher. But the thing that you could do is you could combine Starks for privacy with Starks for scalability, right? So you can have kind of aggregation, and you can have potentially a single proof that kind of represents a whole bunch of, that proves the existence of a whole bunch of proofs. So I think like that's the sort of thing that I think also would wants to see more work happening on in the ecosystem. I mean, and I know there's people doing this in kind of zk rollup constructions and things like that, but having that happen more in a Stark context would be really interesting. Why hash-based as your knowledge is more quantum secure? Yeah, so like basically there's this really common misconception that a lot of people have about quantum computers, which is that quantum computers kind of magically just make P equals NP and like make every problem solvable. And that's completely false, right? Quantum computers can perform much better than classical computers on a limited array of tasks, right? There's something called Shor's algorithm. And unfortunately, these tasks do include breaking the cryptography that we use today, right? So it can break RSA, it can break elliptic curves, it can break a bunch of things, but it cannot break everything, right? So like, for example, we do not know of a way to use quantum computers to break lattice problems more efficiently, which is really nice because lattices are the key building block in fully homomorphic encryption. And so surprisingly enough, quantum computers are not going to break something even as powerful as fully homomorphic encryption. And hashes, like basically the intuition is, right, that hashes don't really have kind of much mathematical structure. Like they don't have the property that, if you hash one thing and you hash another thing, and then you add the two hashes, you get the hash of like the sum of the things. Like you have properties like that with elliptic curves and kind of a bit differently with RSA, but you don't have those properties with hashes at all. Hashes really just kind of turn everything into random junk. And so that basically means that hashes, they do need to be like twice as long to have the same security properties, but it does mean that hashes are actually a quantum secure. So that's another really nice benefit. Why use a Stark-based signature over Picnic? That's another option. And I think post-quantum aggregation-friendly signatures. So we do specifically need post-quantum aggregation-friendly signatures, right? It's definitely a kind of open field. And I'm aware that there's these kind of an MPC in a hat-based or whatever it's called, based constructions. There's constructions like Sphinx, and then there's constructions based off of a Stark. Signature aggregation is really important for Ethereum, just because we have for Ethereum 2.0, because we have a huge number of these kind of signatures just validating transactions that are flying around on chain. And like we have every block potentially we need to aggregate tens of thousands of signatures in the worst case. And so aggregation friendliness is really essential. And unfortunately, the aggregation that we have does rely on these kind of linear homomorphisms so far, which are unfortunately the exact same thing that make them quantum breakable. And so if you can have, like, coming up with a good hash-based or in general a good kind of post-quantum aggregation-friendly, kind of offline aggregation-friendly signature scheme, right? So I make a signature, you make a signature, and then Bob just grabs both our signatures and without talking to us combines them together. Like that's a really important open problem. I mean, if anyone's here is a really smart cryptographer, and I imagine the foundation would even be willing to kind of give substantial grants for that sort of thing. So a really important research area. With ethSTARK, what are the newer different bottlenecks for speed and scalability with Ethereum? So one of them is kind of just data scalability. So just how many bytes can safely go on chain. So unfortunately, like you can zero knowledge proof the validity of computation, but you can't directly zero knowledge proof the availability of data. And so there's some challenges there. So that's one issue. And then another issue, of course, is that like if you start having a lot of computation, then I mean, even with us with the ability of starking, like you have kind of the expense of proving things and so forth. How far away we are?
Okay, so we'll take. Yeah, we'll take this one last question and then we'll continue on. Okay, go ahead.
How far away are we from seeing smart contract implementations using ethSTARK? So in general, my impression is definitely that all zero knowledge proof systems, including Starks and including Plonk and the Stark-based ones, are at present heavily geared toward kind of specific applications. And so you have to do kind of custom work for custom applications. But they are all moving fairly quickly toward kind of being able to be more generic, right? So and being able to like actually zero knowledge prove over smart contracts, and I think is definitely probably the next major challenge of the zero knowledge proof space at this point. So it is something that I expect people will continue working really hard over the next couple of years. And there's challenges like you would have to come up with a kind of zero knowledge proof optimized virtual machine. You would have to come up with a couple of other new tricks. But we've seen a huge amount of progress over this last year, so I'm excited.
Yeah. So I first of all want to thank Vitalik so much for joining us and sharing with us his thoughts. Okay, I'll just comment briefly on this very last question that indeed, first of all, you already see the early, the early sort of versions of things that may evolve into smart contracts like bobbins, die-staff, and air assembly. Of course, there's Socrates, and the Matter labs are also discussing this, and of course, StarkWare also has its own thoughts on the Matter. So I completely agree with Vitalik that we'll likely over the next few years see more of this stuff. Okay, so back to the matter at hand. Okay, so Vitalik, thanks. I'll close the video and let me enlarge again this thing. And now, okay, so there are basically 4 parts that I would like to talk now about. Let me just move this a little bit up here. So like the talk is going to have 4 parts. One is basically the story, right? Just or the timeline. How did we arrive at this thing? It's a kind of a funky story. The second thing I want to tell you about is security, meaning security of a hash function is an extremely important parameter in the selection. Then I'll hand it over to David, who headed the project at StarkWare, and he will talk about the Stark complexity of hash functions. And then he will also talk, time permitting, about their efficiency as just as hash functions. So I'll start with the story timeline, talk a little bit about security, then hand it over. And after each one of these parts, I'm going to pause and we're going to pause and ask for some questions. So feel free, meanwhile, to share questions. So let's start with the timeline. Let's use a different color. And now let's see, because I can't draw lines very well. So this is going to be July 2nd, 18, and this is going to be something like July 1st, 20. So this is a 2-year or this is, you can think of this as t equals 0, and this is whatever, plus 2 years. So on July 2nd, 18, this project started. The Ethereum Foundation signed a grant with StarkWare, and basically it asked for it to do the following things. One is survey hash functions. Two is sort of recommend a Stark-friendly hash. Sorry for my... and then 3 is open source prover plus verifier for it. And the prover plus verifier should be for something like this: 100K hashes, and proof has to be on a quad core. So it must be computable on a quad core. Let me just go up a little bit here. And with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and should be at a rate of at least 100 hashes per second. Okay, now by now we reached 10,000 hashes per second. I should say that there are bonuses. The grant had bonuses for rates of 1,000 per second, and another one for 10K per second. So when we took this upon ourselves, this was in the summer of 2018, 2 years ago, even reaching 100 hashes per second. Oh, by the way, so the verification time should be less than 10 milliseconds, and the proof length should have been less than 200 kilobytes. So 2 years ago, this looked quite daunting, meaning we weren't sure we would even reach the 100 hashes per second, because the only thing that the world knew of back then was what came out of this academic work called the ethSTARK. The proofs there were around 300 to 400 kilobytes long. They took 40 milliseconds to verify. They were at a rate that is much, much lower than 100 hashes per second. And they required, to reach that rate, they required multiple cores, like, 32 cores with like a half a terabyte of RAM. So this looked like a very ambitious project, but nevertheless, we I don't know, maybe we were foolish or something, but we took it on ourselves. So we started. So this was the very first part. So we started with surveying somewhere here. And, since we are not experts in symmetric cryptography, we very quickly contracted back then he was Dr. Tomer Ashur. I know that now he's already a faculty member, so this is probably should be changed to Professor Tomer Ashur, who I saw is also on this call now. He's a symmetric crypt analyst, a pretty good one. So we contacted him and said, okay, can you please help us select the friendliest, Stark friendliest hash function, which means the one whose description in a system of polynomials, and this will be something that David will explain later on, will have very small complexity. So for those of you who have attended previous talks in this series, they roughly know what I mean. Others who have dabbled in R1CS systems also know what I mean. It means that the number of constraints that you need to describe the invocation of one iteration of the hash is low. So Tomer, and he was back then at COSIC, which is one of the leading places in symmetric cryptography in the world. It's in KU Leuven in Belgium. They quickly compiled a list of existing hash functions, and we sort of looked at them. None of them looked very pleasant or very Stark friendly. And the reason for that is that when the world asked for really good cryptographic primitives, the ones that led to AES and SHA-2 and SHA-3 and Blake and all of these things. Among the list of things they wanted to optimize, you didn't see anything related to algebraic complexity or to proof systems. And other things mattered, I guess, electricity consumption, fast on existing hardware. And because of that, those hash functions that are extremely efficient in many different parameters, their description in the algebraic world is very lacking. Anyway, so Tomer and his team came back and said, "Oh, look, why not, instead of surveying and selecting and looking at existing constructions, why not design new ones? It's going to be much better." And we got back to the Ethereum Foundation, and they said, "Yeah, you know what? Let's go in that direction." So at the time, there were already, let me just mention, at the time, there were already quite a few attempts at building hash functions that are more algebraically friendly. The only one that survived, and this was, hasn't been broken, was this beautiful construction called MIMSI. It's extremely beautiful because it's very simple, ingenious in its simplicity. It basically has many invocations of a step that basically takes a single field element, cubes it, and adds a constant. And to date, it has not really been broken. So it's very simple and very easy to work with. So this existed even before we started. And at the time, there were already versions of it, things called GMIMSI, which of course is some version of MIMSI that has more field elements per state. So the Ethereum Foundation with StarkWare funded two separate efforts that led to two other families. The first one is the Marvelous family by the Cossack team, which led to two constructions that I want to discuss. One of them is called Vision, and it's over binary fields, and the other one is called Rescue, and this will end up being the one that we select, and this is over prime fields. That was one effort. The other effort was this other family that's called Hades MIMSI, basically that's related to GMIMSI and to MIMSI, and it also has two constructions. One is called StarkCAD, and the other is called Poseidon, or Poseidon. And so some of these constructions are natively built over binary fields. So these are the ones over binary fields. And the two others are over prime fields. So this brings us roughly to a year ago or so that we sort of had all of these constructions already in hand. And then we needed to sort of engage the public and get a better understanding of what to do. So what we did is we created this Stark-friendly hash challenge that basically picked 5 constructions. So it took, Vision. Let me just. So it took MIMSI. Sorry, it was 6 constructions. It took GMIMSI. It took Vision, Rescue, StarkCAD, and Poseidon, and basically built them a bunch of challenges at 45-bit security, and then at 80-bit security, and also at 128, which is the target designated security we need to construct the hash for, and also at 256, which is sort of a fallback, in case things really were bad. So this was summer. This was summer 19, a year ago, and we started this Stark-friendly hash challenge. Again, it was led by Tomer Ashur as well, who helped us in that part as well. Tomer also was a co-author of the Marvelous construction, along with Simen de Hooge and others. And this challenge went roughly till the fall or so. And at the same time, we also understood that just having a public challenge is not enough, that we also need some serious cryptographers to dedicate time just for this and look at it more extensively. So what we did is, I see I'm running out of space here. So what we did is maybe, how am I going to deal with this? I know. Just going to move this here and tell you what we did now. So the next phase of the process was to do crypt analysis, which means you take people who are experts in building and breaking symmetric cryptography systems, and you ask them to look at these constructions and try to sort of kick the tires and find any problem they may see. So we had several efforts here. The first one was algebraic crypt analysis. So what happens is that these constructions, we tried, the sort of target complexity that we were trying to minimize is the number of low-degree polynomial constraints that capture such a construction. And it turns out that if you minimize this, you're also opening or making it easier for certain algebraic attack vectors that are based on things called the Grebner basis approach, basically solving systems of polynomials. You make it easier for them. So there's this complexity measure. You're trying to reduce it in order to make it friendlier for Starks and also for other systems, Snarks and others. You want to reduce the same complexity measure, which is the number of polynomial constraints that define the cryptographic primitive. But as you're reducing it, you're also necessarily making it easier for algebraic attacks to be mounted on these. So there's this sweet spot that you want to find where it's small enough for it to be efficient, but not small enough for it to be broken. And we contracted the world experts on this matter, on the algebraic crypt analysis, both the theory and the practice. These are professors Jean-Charles Fauger and Ludovic Perret from INRA in Paris. And they have also a company that CNS Security that looked into this deeply and actually found some weaknesses with some of the constructions. So early constructions from the Marvelous family had serious problems. Those were called Jarvis and Pepper, and G-Mimsy and to some extent Poseidon had things that were, unpleasantness, not quite an attack, but things that didn't look quite right. The next phase was another a team that was headed by, this was a team of 10 expert cryptographers headed by Professor Anne Cantot, also from INRA in Paris. And she convened a team of 10 symmetric cryptographers who looked at these constructions and again found some things they weren't too happy about with the specific parameters chosen for standardization in the G-Mimsy and Poseidon constructions. I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that the families that we're talking about are broken or there's anything problematic with them. Rather, it means that the initial parameterizations that were used, there were some things that didn't quite match up to the hopes that we had. So this was for Poseidon had certain problems, G-Mimsy had certain problems, and this left us with basically fewer contenders, namely Vision, Rescue, StarkCAD, and also Mimsy. Those were the ones that we, in the short timeline that we had, could use. And then we went back and looked at the basically at the other parameters that David will soon take over and explain about, the STARK complexity, which is the most important parameter for us, and also the efficiency. And that led us at the end of the process to suggest using Rescue as or a very specific version of Rescue over a rather small field as the Stark friendly hash, for which the code that we'll be releasing next week or very soon is about. So I'm now going to, so this is basically the story. I'll just, again, 2 years ago, we were asked to find a Stark function to find a hash that is Stark friendly. Early on, we agreed with the Ethereum Foundation that it's better to actually solicit new constructions, even though it's a very short timeline. So we were lucky to have a collection of, as you can see here, 6 different contenders. We went through a public process of checking out these contenders, doing a Stark-friendly hash challenge with prizes, and also convening teams of world-leading cryptographers to kick the tires and find any weaknesses. It was all on a very short schedule. The end of this was the end of the security left us with basically 4 contenders, which are Mimsy, Vision, Rescue, and StarkCAD. And we singled out Rescue for reasons that I'll let David describe soon. So let me go back and take questions. Are there any questions? Okay, meanwhile, just to make sure if there are questions, so please ask them. I'll just say one more thing about all of these hash functions, or the way we instantiated them. So they were all built using a sponge method, which means something like this. All of these constructions can be thought of as permutations, meaning every input has a single output. So every input to the hash, it's not describing it this way, it's not really a hash function. It doesn't compress anything. So all of these constructions, Mimsy, Jim Mimsy, the Marvelous family, Hadis family, inside them, they have something that looks like a random permutation, something that for every input has a unique output at the other side. And once you have something that is this kind of a permutation and also has a sufficient cryptographic pseudo-random properties, meaning that you can't really guess for an output what its input was, or you can't do it easily, or if you see half of the entries, you don't know how to fill in the others. There's a standard way to convert it into a hash function, which is called this sponge construction. And the way you do a sponge construction is you take, maybe let me just draw this because we did this with all of them. So let me go and draw and show you a little bit what a sponge construction looks like. So suppose you have this thing where here comes the input, and here's the output. And this is like, think of this as some random permutation. So it's like really messed up. So now, and here you have, n inputs, and here you have n outputs. Actually, let me use the number m, because that's, and let's even think of m equaling 12, because that's pretty much what it's going to end up with. So now what you could do is you could take this random permutation and make it into a hash, something like this. So what you do is you take, let's say you take 4 of these inputs and you call them, and you basically make everything here 0. And here you put in your first input, and you sort of shake it. And then you get this weird state. And then here again, you sort of inject your next 4 inputs. And then you take the rest from here. And then you reach this new state, and you sort of take your 4 outputs somewhere here. I guess also from here down here. So this is a sponge construction, roughly. And you took 8 inputs, and you sort of ran them through 2 invocations of the hash, and what you got at the end was 4 outputs. So you took 8 inputs and mapped them into 4 outputs, so you sort of compressed. You had a 2-to-1 compression, and this is, this thing is, known as a sponge construction. And the symmetric crypt analyst will forgive me if I'm, getting things a little bit wrong here, but all of these constructions, the ones that we had here are supposed to be these sort of random permutations, and then you instantiate them as sponge constructions, which means that you inject, you do like twice, you apply the hash twice, and then you inject your elements in a certain sequence, and that's how you get the hash working. So any questions? Good. So I will now hand it over to David, who will tell us about the STARK complexity. Okay, while David is coming online, I see there's a question. Do these random permutation have homomorphic equivalence? I guess by homomorphic equivalence, you're referring to things like homomorphic encryption and things. So the answer is actually that these constructions are very non-homomorphic, and that's so the ones that have homomorphic properties, things like Peterson hash and things like that. They have provable security. You can reduce them to problems like factoring or the discrete log, and that's very nice. But they are also, first of all, post-quantum susceptible. They are breakable. The homomorphism usually leads you to quantum susceptibility. I mean, not in all cases, because there are ones who have some homomorphic properties but are still quantum resistance, ones based on LWE and lattice-based constructions. Yeah, but these permutations, to the best of my knowledge, don't have homomorphic versions. These are more the analogs of the good old symmetric, primitives, the ones like AES, SHA-1, SHA-2. Okay. So now I am going to hand it over to David Levitt, who has been leading the Stark-friendly hash project at StarkWare. David, all yours.
Thank you very much, Eli. Let me share my screen first. Okay, so yeah. Can you see my board? Eli?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to correct you. Here you said that it's two invocations for one hash because you said that it's two invocations to compress 8 inputs into 4, but actually the correct construction is that here you have 8 inputs. Okay, so this is going to be 8.
I stand corrected.
And this is 4. Okay, so to compress 8 inputs into 4, you need only one invocation. And then if you would like to compress more, 16 or even more, then you need more invocations. So now I'll talk about the Stark complexity. So when we first had to discuss what is a Stark-friendly hash function, we found out that it's quite a tricky question, because we need to understand what are we trying to optimize. Is it the prover? So let me just write it down. So there are 3 measures: the prover time, okay, the verifier time, and the proof length. Okay, so all 3 measures have trade-offs among them. So it depends on the application, actually, what is going to be the prover time, the verifier time, and the proof length. But we can still compare different hash functions and say that one of them is better than the other using some other measures. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here we have some comparison between different hashes. So let me just move this here. Okay, so one of the measures is going to be the field type. Okay, so the field type could be either a prime field, okay, or binary field. Now, when proving a Stark, when proving a hash function, if it's a Stark-friendly hash function that was constructed over some specific field, then we need to use the same field in the Stark protocol in order to use this efficiency. So let's say sorry. Still here. Let's say we use a prime field. So in the Stark protocol, we have two steps: the arithmetization, and then we have the low degree and the fry. So for the arithmetization, we are trying to represent the computation and index the trace using some group. So this group should be a cyclic group because a computation is usually consecutive. We cannot index, or it is very hard to index a consecutive computation using the elements of a binary field because using the elements of the additive group of the binary field. So the arithmetization needs a cyclic group. It needs a cyclic group. So in a prime field, we have this. In both fields, we have this multiplicative group. But then when we go forward to the low degree extension, so the low degree extension is the fry. They both need a group of size that is a power of 2. So in that case, for the prime field, this is the same group, the group of the arithmetization and the group of the LD, because in the prime field, the group that is the multiplicative group can actually have a subgroup that is of size that is a 2's power. But in a binary field, the multiplicative group is always odd. So it makes it adds complications to the Stark protocol, which means that for the sake of Stark friendliness, we will usually prefer a prime field. Okay, so this is one consideration. There still can be Starks over binary fields, but they are quite more difficult, not extremely more difficult, but it is a consideration. Okay, so the second consideration is the field size. Okay, so field size. So since the bottleneck of Stark prover is actually the low degree extension, which is fast Fourier transform, so the main operation in this algorithm is actually a multiplication in the field. So smaller fields actually have faster multiplication, which means that this is the prover time is almost linear in the time that takes to multiply two field elements in the field. So the field size is very crucial. And I will say another thing, that this is another reason to prefer a prime field over a binary field, because currently in current PCs, prime multiplication of prime field multiplication is a bit faster than binary field multiplications of the same size. So again, this is another point for the prime fields. So this was a second consideration. The next consideration is the trace size. Okay, so now we get to actually the design of the hash function. What is the trace size? Actually, when we design an error for some hash function, we need to translate the computation to some two-dimensional tables. So we have this two-dimensional table which contains all the intermediate states of the computation throughout the computation. So the size of this trace actually affects the prover time. But how does it affect it? So let's say the proving time equals d plus w t log t. We say O of this multiplications. Okay, field multiplications. So this
David,
formula.
Can you say what dw and t are?
Yeah, I was right.
Sorry.
I was right about to explain what they are. So D is the degree of the algebraic representation. We will talk about it, and then we have W and T, where the W is the width of this trace and T is the length of this trace. So actually, in the trace we have WT cells. So you can say, wait a minute, I can always reorder the trace in some different way so that W is much larger and T is much longer. But this is going to affect the very-far. So we have here a trade-off, which bounds W very quickly. So W cannot be larger than some constant that we decide upon. But still, when we compare two functions, we can do this trick to both functions. So actually, the total area of the trace depends only on the function, and we can say that two functions, we can compare just the area of the trace of two functions, and this will tell us which function will be better. Although we still have this trade-off between prover and verifier in both functions. So what is D? D is the last interesting consideration, except for the CPU efficiency, which we are going to talk later, if we have time. So D is the degree, okay? Now, some of the constructions have some natural degree over which the constraints are made. But every error actually has a trade-off. Every error can be redesigned to have smaller degree or to have higher degree, with the cost of changing the trace size. So in this case, we would like to, if we have two functions that we want to compare, we would like to design errors with the same degree for both, and then we look at the trace size that we got to see which of them has a smaller trace. Okay, so if I go back here, we can see. Let me zoom in. So we can see all the candidates that we considered. On the right column, you can see the proving time that we calculated for 10,000 invocations of the hash. And you can see that all the algebraic sponge constructions, which are the actual candidates that we considered, all of these have the smallest trace sizes. Now you can see here, you can see D, which is the degree, as I mentioned. These Ds are the most these Ds are the Ds that we found most natural for these functions, and you can see that some of them are different, but when we compare, for instance, Rescue and Poseidon, then we see that first of all they are of the same field type, the same field size. Okay, so so far they are quite the same degree, and then we see that the proving time of both is quite similar. So we see that they are not that different. But if I take, for example, Rescue versus MIMC, so first of all, they are both prime, which is good, but MIMC is over a much larger field. Okay, they both have the same degree, which makes them comparable in these designs. But the total trace size, so for Rescue it's 10 times 12, it's 120, and for MIMC it's a lot larger, 640. So both in the trace size and in the field size, MIMC is much worse. So we see it in the proving time, which is a lot bigger. Okay, so
maybe we'll pause for questions. I see there are 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll talk about the efficiency as okay.
How do I close the? Okay.
I think you did it well. Okay. So David, do you want to answer this? Yeah, go ahead.
So the first question, is prime field multiplication also faster than binary field multiplication if you use the psimul? Yes, the psimul is we did use it. It's almost as fast as we would like, but it's still not as fast. It's like, I don't remember, 30% slower. Not a very big deal, but mathematically it should have been faster, because binary field multiplication actually has less bit operations in it. Just in pieces, it's not very used, so it was not optimized in the Intel architecture. Okay. So next question. How does the choice of field size affect proof size? If you went with field size, roughly by how much would proof sizes increase? So the field size is actually, it's quite a tricky question. The field size in the StarkWare protocol, we have 2 fields actually. The field over which the trace is computed, the computation field, and then we have the field over which the Fry protocol is made, which is an extension field of that field. So the Fry protocol has to be over a field that is that has enough bits in it to for the security of the protocol. In the rescue example, the rescue is defined over a field of 64 bits, which is not enough for our security. So the trace is over 64 bits, but the Fry is then in an extension field, which is 128 bits. So by changing to a rescue of larger field, we actually don't very much change the size of the proof. It's the proof consists of both fields from the trace and both elements from the trace field and the extension field, but how to say it? So if you move from rescue 128 to from rescue 64 to rescue 128, it will enlarge only these fields in the proof. But then if you want to move from rescue 128 to rescue 256, then it will enlarge all the field elements in the proof. So for the next question, I see that T is smaller for Poseidon than for rescue, and still the running time for rescue is faster. How come? So as we said, the trace size is not T; it is T times W. So the width of the computation also matters. Actually, what matters is the total number of trace cells.
Maybe you can go back to the screen and then
I will go back. I'm not sure. Yeah, I can do it. Okay, so back to the to here. So Poseidon actually has 8 times 17 field elements in the trace, and the rescue has 10 times 12. So Poseidon has a bit larger trace.
Okay, do you want to maybe move on to the? I saw there's another question, but let's maybe take it after the last part where you want to talk about the efficiency, let's say CPU efficiency of the different contenders.
Yes, the CPU efficiency. So let's go back.
And that's going to be sort of the last topic, and then we'll answer questions and summarize.
Yes. So let's wait a minute. So here you can see actually this is an estimation of the number of field multiplications that are needed for each of the hash functions. So you can see that first of all, you can see that all the candidates except MIMC are over fields of size approximately 64, which means that all their field multiplications are about the same, with a small difference that binary field multiplication is a bit slower on the pieces, but with the correct hardware, they would be the same, or even binary field will be a bit faster. So this is the field size, and then we see here that rescue, for example, which is the chosen hash, actually has the highest complexity in a PC. The reason is that rescue has this operation of taking the third root in it. This is an operation that in Starks it's very efficient, because taking the third root is equivalent to saying that the current state is a cubing of the next state. But in a CPU, it is going to be actually log f operations. So this is the 70 that we see here. Actually, the 70 is break to 68 operations for the third root, plus 2 operations for raising to the third power. But also that although that we saw that this is the most inefficient hash function that we considered on a CPU, we managed to prove about 10,000 hashes per second, which means that it is good enough for our purposes. So the other considerations were more important for us. Actually, the most important consideration for us was the security, which over which we didn't want to we didn't want any lack of security, even if there is some very small direction to an attack. We didn't want to take the risk.
So I'd like to jump in and maybe just summarize. Is that okay, David?
Yes, thank you.
So we had this list that you see on the screen, I think, and what happened was that there were certain issues, security-wise. There were some issues, some things that were not entirely clear with gmimc and Poseidon. So that sort of ruled them out, at least for this stage. We preferred prime fields over binary, which means that sort of we preferred not to do these two. And then among these two, which, as you can see here, have the, among Rescue and mimc, which are both secure enough and even in terms of efficiency, have pretty similar efficiency. The STARK complexity of Rescue was much better, so we chose it. I just want to emphasize again what I said before. Even though you have a red marking here, it does not mean that slightly different tweakings of parameters of gmimc and Poseidon are not safe. And actually, that would be really great, because as you can see here, the complexity of both gmimc and Poseidon are extremely good. So I would say that we could think of Rescue as being, let's say, the Stark friendly hash version 1, and we definitely need, let's say in 3 years, Stark friendly hash 2. I think it would be really great if the Ethereum Foundation leads the way again and helps solicit, let's say, a proper, timely, longer-term selection of the next Stark friendly hash. Just like we have SHA-2 and SHA-3, and I think everyone agrees, including the, symmetric cryptographers. Alan Shapieniak, who was from the Marvelous team, and Tomer Ashur, and Dimitri and Christian from the Hades mimc family. I think everyone agrees that there must be even more efficient things that are just as secure, and so it would be really good to have another round that be done. So let's maybe answer questions, and then mention that Rescue is not chosen for some reason, though it seems that Rescue is faster than Poseidon, slightly unwired. So there was some confusion. Rescue is the one chosen, Poseidon is not chosen. And the reason, this very particular, again, Poseidon is a large family of constructions. And to date, it's not that we have an attack on Poseidon. Rather that, among the list of properties that were listed there by the designers, one of the properties didn't, wasn't as claimed. And because of the very short timeline, and I guess, what the independent team of symmetric crypt analysts said is, they said, this is better wait for things to settle and see a more robust version in which everything matches up. So what I said was referring to Poseidon, not to Rescue. And I see that already Tomer Ashur answered this. Okay. If there are no more questions, let's maybe wait a few seconds. David, would you like to summarize? And folks who want to ask questions, please do.
Yes. So actually, as you said, the Rescue is the one that is chosen. It is actually among the 5 candidates. Actually, most of them were about the same efficiency. We had in each candidate we had several versions that over different fields, but in all the candidates we had at least one version over a 64 bits field, which was the leading, and all the 64-bit version hashes actually made pretty much good performance. So indeed, in the end, we chose by the recommendation of the committee for the security. and the consideration of a prime field.
Okay, so just final words are that sometime next week the code will be open sourced, and we'll send an email to everyone that was registered here with pointer to the GitHub repo. It's going to be under Apache 2.0. There will be some documentation. Everyone's invited to start building on the code. Feel free to reach out if you have any other suggestions, or if you want to start building on it. We'd love to see the community, using this and expanding on it, and building a lot of marvelous things, as Vitalik said at the beginning of the talk. I guess at the end we should, of course, on this project thank, first of all of the teams of independent experts that helped us so much. So Professor Jean-Charles Fougère and Ludovic Perret from the Cryptonext security team, the Algebraic Crypt Analysts, Anne Cantor, Gregor Landner, and Friedrich Wimmer, who headed the various security crypt analysts for that helped us, recommended what to work with. Of course, the teams that the Hades MIMSI team and the Marvelous team, who did the marvelous job, and the one entity that we have to thank most is, of course, the Aetherium Foundation, who had this visionary idea and led the way on this, as they do on so many other things. So also thanks to, of course, to Vitalik and Albert and the whole Aetherium Foundation. I see there's one last question. What are your next plans? Wow, that's a grand, I was just thinking that we haven't even asked for suggestions for the next talk. So okay, but let's so that's a big question. What are your next plans? I would start by saying that we would really like to see the community building on ethSTARK. We think it's a very solid foundation for the most efficient proving and verification out there. There's so many nice things that people can start doing with this. For instance, this just gives you a hash chain. You probably want to prove, Merkle roots. You want to do all kinds of things with data availability. Vitalik and Dankad and Justin have a lot of ideas in that direction. You want to take and make it into a zero knowledge. This version is a Stark. It doesn't have a provable zero knowledge. It's probably not zero knowledge, but actually converting it into a zero knowledge version is a very nice and low hanging fruit. It's not that hard to get it done. And then basically start building on it. We just released Vidu, which is a VDF. Currently, we're running the proving service for that, but it would be really nice if people sort of take this and build on it. Vidu, convert it into a Vidu prover. There's so many things out there. So yeah, that's a good question. What are our next plans? Well, we want ethSTARK to really have a life of its own. Okay, so we still have, but to answer Robert's question, we still have to figure out what is the topic for the next meeting in 2 weeks. We'll find something. I don't want to take any more of the time because we already passed 1.5 hours. So thank you, everyone. David, you want to say final word?
Thank you, Eli, and I want to thank my team that made this project in a very short time. This was a really joint effort. So thank you very much.
Okay, to be continued in 2 weeks' time. Goodbye.
Bye.